Hey, you know what, guys? This right here, this rambling, boring conversation containing already made before observations, this could be a podcast.
It's actually not a bad idea.
Really? A podcast? Don't you have to be some sort of whiz kid to do those?
Definitely not. Anyone with a computer can make one.
Well, that's it. We're anyone.
Across the CHL every year for over 8 months, teams battle to win games.
Tir et le but! Jérémy Langlois donne la victoire au Husky, 4-3 période de prolongation.
Championships.
40 years in the making! The Moose Jaw Warriors are Western Hockey League champions!
And the Memorial Cup.
It's a pure Michigan Memorial Cup for Saginaw!
The stories told along the way capture the hearts of fans in big cities.
Sweet victory for the Calgary Hitmen!
And small towns.
The Owen Sound attack in front of a big house today at the base store.
All around the world.
Maybe not the world. In Canada probably, but in like 3 or 4 states.
We follow the stories and add our insight. Welcome to All 60, a CHL podcast.
And just like that, we're off and running. Hello, everybody. I am Steve McLean, and welcome to the very first official episode of All 60, a CHL podcast. I thank you all for tuning into the prologue that I released earlier this week to give a rundown on what you can expect from this show. And as I mentioned, plenty of co-hosts and co-hosting with me for episode number 1 is our travel correspondent, Mr. Kevin Jordan. Kevin, how are you today?
It's good to be here, Steve. I'm very excited for the upcoming hockey season. It's unusual for me to be this geeked about a hockey season this early when it's still technically August as we record this. But yeah, this should be a good episode today, looking back on what we did last year and maybe a little bit of looking ahead as well. But yeah, I'm ready. Bring on the new season. It's going to be a great one.
It's funny, folks. I talked to Kevin, multiple summers, and he's not really ready until hockey's actually going. But man, this year he's psyched, and we have some big plans for the 24-25 season. But as Kevin mentioned, with this episode, we're going to be taking a look back as we begin, because last year we had a heck of a travel schedule in the 23-24 season. I hit, about 1,000 new arenas last year, Kevin? Something like that?
I don't keep spreadsheets the way that you do, but it was definitely at least 900.
Yeah, 900. Okay, I hit 26 new arenas across, not just the CHL, but pro hockey as well. I hit 11 in the CHL. Kevin hit 3 new ones for himself, and we have got ourselves up to within striking distance of completing all 60. But we're going to go through chronologically just our CHL stuff from last year, because we don't need episode 1 to be 4.5 hours long if we included all of our pro stuff. But we will get to our pro stuff on another episode at a later date. But the season started off early for us. As a matter of fact, game 1 for both of us last year was going out to BC, and we went to the most remote outpost in the CHL, Prince George. We got to see a Prince George Cougars game, but it wasn't just going to a Prince George Cougars game, because the travel alone to get there, Kevin, was a little bit crazy.
Yeah. I all along never expected to get to Prince George. No matter how crazy it is to go to all 20 OHL ranks or all 18 Q ranks or whatever, Prince George is on another level, even if you live within the WHL's catchment area. And I always just assumed I'd never get there. Last year, end of October was when Swoop was dying. Flights from Southern Ontario to Edmonton were ridiculously cheap, and we just decided if we don't do it now, I don't know when we're going to. I wasn't planning on going to Prince George last season. I don't think you were either. I didn't really want to save it for last, but I was very grateful that we did have a good opportunity and got to do that drive on a lovely fall day and knock off Prince George.
Yeah, that drive, as you mentioned, we flew into Edmonton, and we flew into Edmonton the night before, and we were up at basically the crack of dawn for an all-day drive. For people in Ontario, it's about, distance-wise, it's about the same as driving from, the GTA up to the Soo. The problem is there's none of the big, wide highways. Not that there aren't highways, but it's all twisting road. Well, not all twisting roads. About the first, longer than you would expect. What, the first 3-4 hours, Kevin, was kind of prairie/farmland?
Yeah, I would say it's sort of like a drive of thirds. Like the first third is high prairie, like west from Edmonton, where you can't really see mountains, and there's more forest than I would have expected. It's not like empty prairie or anything like that up there, but it's definitely like foothills country, a little bit of rolling hills, but kind of just flat and boring, not a lot of towns or anything like that. The second third of the drive is the spectacular one where you're going through the Yellowhead Pass and past Mount Robson through Jasper. And then the third, once you're into the BC interior, it no longer really feels like mountain country, but it's just remote as hell up there.
We were lucky enough to stop at Mount Robson. I had never seen it before, and you pointed out to me, what is it? It's the tallest mountain in the Canadian Rockies, correct?
If I said that back then, I'm sure I was probably right. I haven't looked it up or anything like that in advance of this podcast, but
no spreadsheets for you, but
no.
I
saw Mount Robson once before when I was 19. I did a train trip out west, but it had been quite some time for me, so it was just as spectacular as I remembered.
And through most of that drive, once you get out of the foothills area, no cell service. You feel a little isolated. Lots of stop and go. Well, I shouldn't say lots, but a little bit of stop and go for not construction, but for logging purposes, you could say, or cleaning up the roads. And just there's that sign not too far after Mount Robson that said, what was it, last gas for almost 300 kilometers or 250 kilometers.
Yeah, McBride, I think, was the town that just on the far side of the national park. And when there's a gas station in McBride and a big sign as you're leaving that basically says no gas till Prince George, which was about 2 hours. And we were fine. Like I've driven in remote areas before, you have as well. So we were prepared for it. It's not like it's completely going into nowhere. Like if we'd had an emergency, I'm sure we would have survived. But it is definitely a remote town up in northern BC there.
It's a little bit different than, driving to Kingston on a Friday afternoon, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
That first look, though, is you drive down into Prince George, you kind of come around, you're coming down a hill, and you kind of just, the road comes around a corner, and there it is at the bottom of the hill. You could basically see almost the entirety of Prince George. And I know when we came around that corner, it's just that feeling of like, oh my God, we actually made it here. Yeah. Like, it's not this really grand place, but man, what a sense of accomplishment.
My friends Peter Farrell and Andrew Kulik, who do the Ultimate Sports Road Trip, the couple guys out of Buffalo who were the first ones to ever go to a game in all four major U.S. sports, like every arena. Like at that time it was all 121, so basketball, football, hockey, and baseball. They coined the phrase years ago in the sports road trip community of a WTF are we doing here trip. Prince George is definitely up on that list. If they didn't have a CHL team, I can't imagine I'd have ever gone, but it was definitely worth the drive. It was worth the experience getting to go there.
A little bit of a disclaimer here. Sorry, people of Prince George, but we didn't find... You have a spectacular setting, I will say that. Gorgeous looking town and the surroundings, but once you get into Prince George, it's just kind of another town, right? And some areas that are run down and, like anything in these days with the way the economy is and all that, but outside of the game, it wasn't much.
It has that sort of hardscrabble northern vibe about it. It's kind of like Sault Ste. Marie or Sudbury does, or places like that. But Rouyn-Noranda and Val-d'Or a little bit, but not in a bad way. The aggressive homeless population I could have done without. It was a town. It was a reasonably nice town. They had a CHL team. Don't need to talk a huge amount about the town because it was the game that we went for, though, and also for the incredible old building that we went in before that as well, where the Cougars used to play. Yeah,
I was going to bring that up first. Before the game itself, there is the Prince George Coliseum. So just a quick history. The Cougars used to be in Victoria, and in 1994, they moved up to Prince George, and their current modern-day rink, the CN Center, wasn't ready yet. It wouldn't be ready for about another year. So they played for their first season out of the Prince George Coliseum, much smaller, and kind of even by mid-90s standards, it might have been just below CHL standards, but they made it work for a season, and currently a BCHL team calls it home. And that place, Kevin, I think we were in pretty much in agreement. Gorgeous arena.
Oh, amazing, yeah. From the outside, it's not much. It's just kind of a box. But on the inside, like, Prince George is a logging town, first and foremost, railway and logging. And you can tell they had a large supply of wood when they built this place. Because, like, the concourse in the arena is parquet. Like, it's like being on a gym floor, like polished wood floors everywhere. Like, wood seats, wood everything. Like, I imagine if it ever caught fire, it would go up in smoke like nobody's business. But yeah, just the wood construction on this place was incredible to see. We'll talk about this a little bit when we do our pro podcast about how there's so few left. And I'll just mention here as a teaser, Syracuse is the one I'm thinking of. But there aren't a lot of old rinks left at any level of sports that are old and feel old. Like most of the ones that, in my opinion, most of the ones that are still around have been extensively renovated. Like Kitchener's Odd is fantastic, but it's an old building that's been kept up to date. And, you know, Syracuse and some others, and Prince George falls into the Coliseum falls into this category where it's just like, it's so mid-century modern in there. There's very, very few things in there that make you realize that it's not still 1958. And I loved that. I loved getting to see it.
One thing that was really unique about this building too, and it's something, you know, you always see barns here and there with the team benches are on opposite sides, and that's usually a sign of something different. Or maybe in the penalty boxes are with one of the benches and the benches on the opposite side. But this is the only rink I've ever come across, Kevin, where both benches and the penalty boxes were on one side of the rink. So if you were sitting on the opposite side of the rink, you could sit dead center ice, row one.
Yep, pretty spectacular to be able to get that view. I'm not aware of any other arena anywhere else that I've ever been that has the option of sitting on the red line in row one. So, you know, that would be a cool view to have. I imagine it's probably season tickets, but still, what a cool place to be able to sit.
Shout out to the nice lady who let us come in and walk around. The doors to the rink were locked up when we got there in the afternoon before the Cougars game. And try as she might, she really wanted us to hang around for the next day. I think the next day was going to be their home opener or a home game anyway. She mentioned how crowds at Cougars games can be a little bit quiet, but man, they really support the was it the Lumber Kings or
Spruce Kings?
Spruce Kings, I think it was.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not up on my BCHL quite as much, but the Prince George BCHL team, apparently they do pretty well. Obviously, much smaller building. It won't take nearly as many fans to make noise, but you know, give her credit for trying. She tried to keep us in for the BCHL game. Will we be back for a BCHL game?
No.
Sorry, PG. No, not in a long time. But let's get to the Prince George Cougars themselves and their current home, the CN Center. Built in, I think it opened 1995, so it's just past its 30th, or it's approaching its 30th birthday, I should say. Out on kind of like the fairgrounds area of town, kind of at the edge of town, but you know, a good thing about that is, man, plenty of free parking.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, you know, a lot of rinks, particularly out west, I find a lot of rinks have settings in fairgrounds areas, and Prince George was no different. Like it's a standard, pretty CHL rink, like surrounded by fields, parking lots, fairground. Like, yeah, nothing really too special about it. It did blend in really well. There's some nice foothills behind it, so it's sort of in pictures you can sort of tell that it's right on the edge of a forest, and very picturesque. But I don't know, there are prettier rinks out there.
Kind of reminded me, from looking at it from the outside, reminded me a little bit, if we're just talking about the building itself and the main rink itself, because there was, I think, another arena attached to it, like so many arenas in Canada have nowadays. But the main arena itself, kind of from the outside, looks like the Agrodome in Regina, except it's like a light hunter green as opposed to orange.
Yeah, I would agree. It's got that sort of enter at the corners feel about it, and the roof is the main architectural detail, I suppose you'd say, and it's painted sort of I don't know what you call it, like an emerald green, I guess. Like it's like I say, it's not an ugly building. It's not like Regina that went for traffic cone orange. I don't know why they did that.
It was easy to see anytime I fly across the country, on a sunny day or clear day, I should say, the Agrodome is very easy to see from 30,000 feet. So I will,
absolutely,
I will give it that. coming into the rink, the concourse I wanted to talk about first, because while nothing super stand out about it, other than the fact that they have wood carvings everywhere, not just of like animals and stuff, but the actual section signs are carved out of wood. And man, does that just like scream BC or not?
Yeah, it's very cool. Like the design cues in there are all really, really well done. Like,
yeah, I would also say kind of gave me a Mississauga vibe if you take away all the nice wood carving stuff, in the sense that they had windows that to the outside on the exterior of the concourse. So with it being a home opening game late in September, the sun is still up, at game time, so a lot of natural light flowing in. That was nice. But
completely.
But Kevin, I think you and I, before we get into the bowl and the rink itself, one last thing about the concourse. I think your and I's biggest gripe with it was the team store, or lack thereof.
Yeah. The CHL is interesting because there are organizations in the CHL of the 60 teams that are basically pro quality, and I don't mean quality in the sense of like the on the ice or whatever even, but just some of places like your Londons or your Rimouskis, you're going to a pro game just on a smaller scale, and Prince George very much still has that mom and pop feel about it. Like, they'll sell you a team jersey, they'll sell you a hat or a puck or whatever, but there's not a lot of thought towards monetizing the experience the way that a lot of teams are. And you can sort of really see that it's just a small business. It's a team being run by the community for the community. The team store was about the size of 3 phone booths welded together. There really wasn't much to it.
Yeah, like so small that the actual cashier was on the outside of the store, and the merch available was pretty much as bare bones as you get in the CHL. Like, here's your jerseys, here's some golf shirts, here's a couple t-shirts, pucks, and a couple pins. That's about it. None of that extra stuff, which, hey, some people, like that minimalist approach. But shout out to the team employee who I guess saw through social media we were there and gave us free 30th anniversary pins, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, very nice of whoever that was. Nice to meet locals. I always try very hard not to be recognized when I travel, but it is nice to be recognized from time to time.
For sure. Let's talk about the Arena Bowl itself, the rink itself. The CN Center reminded me a lot of Mississauga. If I wanted to give it an OHL counterpart, Mississauga is the one that it really reminded me of the most. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
The Western League does have a couple of larger capacity clone rinks that they don't really have quite the same way in the Ontario and Quebec leagues. And to me, the closest clones of Prince George were probably either Kelowna or Victoria, which are both kind of similar. Like it's a north of 6,000 seats, all one level, reasonably steep, like concourse underneath. Pretty standard WHL clone rink, I guess you could say.
I liked the fact that they had some standing room at the top of the building, and that color scheme. I mean, it probably looked good when it opened 30 years ago, but it doesn't really mix with today.
Yeah, like I'm an old house guy, really. Like I have an old house, and I like age-appropriate stuff for my old house. And what I mean by this is, I think if you go for trendy decor choices, then you have to change every 10 or 20 years to make it look good still, or it'll just look out of date. Where if you go with timeless, then it'll look good forever. And in a hockey sense, timeless is team colors. Timeless is, making it feel local. Where the CN Center probably was very trendy when it opened in the mid-90s, because every single painted surface in there is hunter green and burgundy. And that looked good in the mid to late 90s, apparently. I was there for it, but I was never that much of a fan. But it just looks completely out of date now. And you'd think that if they bought new seats, painted everything in black and red, like black and red's a great color scheme for a team. It would look fantastic, but it'll probably never happen.
Yeah, red seats and maybe black handbars and rafters that would look pretty good. Before we get to the game itself, I want to talk about a couple of the little extras about the CN Center. First of all, with it being the CN Center, great tie-in with their Zambonis, making them look like CN locomotives.
Yeah, completely. there were two Zambonis, which a lot of rinks have these days, but one was made up like a modern CN locomotive, and the other was made up like an old steam engine and did like the realistic chuffing noises and the steam boiler coming out. Like it was just very cute. Like Zambonis are often sponsored in professional hockey and whatever. Like people, they can take money from whoever they want, but it was cool that sort of CN followed that idea to its logical conclusion.
Absolutely. And also shout out to the RC blimp operator. You know, the RC blimp was something that I found that was really big in the late 90s. And then as we moved on, they kind of faded away. But I've noticed them coming back a little bit. And there was one in Prince George. And during pregame warm-up, there wasn't many people there. And this guy was a troll operator on the 10th degree.
Yeah, best RC blimp guy I've ever seen. He would go around and like literally like boop kids on the back of the head, like crash into them and stuff like that. Not like in any sort of malicious way, but it was actually fun watching what he was going to do next. And it's one of the only times that I've ever been able to say like you actually pay attention to it, as opposed to just it flies around in the building and drops coupons.
Yeah, he was doing flips and stuff, so big shout out to that guy. He knows what he's doing. Let's get to the game. It was the home opener. The Prince George Cougars, before the season started, were expected to be a solid team this year, but as we mentioned earlier, they have a bit of a reputation of being not the loudest fans and maybe, you know, not the biggest crowds in the WHL. We didn't get a big crowd. I think it was only, like 2,800 or something like that, so less than a half full building. But give credit to the people who were there. I thought for the crowd size that we had, I thought the atmosphere was very good.
Yeah, nothing really to add to that, but it was loud enough. Atmosphere was pretty good. They blew out, I think 9-1, I think was the final score or something like that.
9-0.
9-0, right.
Yeah.
So, obviously seeing the home team win is always going to make a better game anyway. It was a good experience. It was better than I expected, because I've heard over the years that Prince George, usually they don't have a great team, and usually the fans kind of stay away and are pretty quiet. But one of the things that added into the not really going to Prince George before was the fact that we reasonably expected that even after driving and flying all this way, that we'd be going to see a relatively quiet game in a relatively half-empty building. But that wasn't what we got, and so expectations definitely exceeded reality. It was a cool experience.
Yeah, 5-0 in the first period, so it was a blowout right from the start. But the fans stayed into it all game. Maybe not as loud in the third period as they were in the first, but you know, great crowd, and I was really happy to see. Ended up Prince George, you know, for a team that was starting their 30th anniversary, they only had one team banner up in the rafters, which is never a good sign for a team that's 30 years old. But
no.
They get to add at least, they add one more because they did win their division this past season. They went to the Final Four, and from what I've heard, they should be good again this year. So for those people who, those great fans who go in, year out up in PG, here's hoping the 24-25 season is good for you.
Yeah, here.
That was your only new rink for this trip. I got another new rink, and you got your first and, to my knowledge, only repeat so far in the WHL, as we made our way back to Edmonton, and we got to take in an Edmonton Oil Kings game. I had never really been to Edmonton properly before. I've just kind of flown out of the airport once before this trip, and as we know, the airport in Edmonton is not actually in Edmonton. It's south of town. That's besides the point. So first thing we did when we got there, you can't get in it anymore, but I had to go see the old Northlands Coliseum.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to see Northlands when I first went to Edmonton as well, and I've never been there. I didn't get to a game. I've never been inside. It really should have been torn down years ago, but apparently there's so much asbestos in there.
We demand more asbestos! More asbestos! More asbestos! More asbestos!
That it's taking them the better part of a decade to finish the remediation so that they can tear the building down. If you've never been to Edmonton, Northlands Coliseum is in the north end of town. It's not the best neighborhood that it's in. There's really not a lot around there. The city's fairgrounds is, again, sort of right there, but other than that, it's just kind of a bit of a dumpy area. But it was cool to see the Coliseum, at least from the outside, other than the fact that there's no banners or signage or Wayne Gretzky statue or anything anymore. It's basically the same as it was before when the Oilers played there, so it is kind of cool to see it while it's still standing.
Yep, just an old circular 70s Coliseum just standing there, looking a lot smaller. You know, when you look at NHL rinks now and then you go and stand outside and look at that and you go, how was this an NHL building?
Yeah.
But they made it work. And then you have the total opposite. We made our way to downtown Edmonton, and the giant, absolutely giant Rogers Place was awaiting us.
Yeah, this was my third visit to Rogers Place, actually. I saw an Oilers game in 2018. The Oil Kings was my first game after the pandemic, so I guess this would have been probably fall of 2021, I think, when there were still vaccine passports and mandatory masking and all that, and people in Edmonton were staying away from the Oil Kings at that point. So I've been to several games at St. Mike's College Arena, back when it only held 1,600 people, but this was the least attended junior game I've ever been to. I would estimate no more than about 700 people were at this game in an 18,000 seat arena. And so I was excited to get back to Edmonton just to see it properly with a real crowd and real promotions and being run the way that it should be, I guess, because I don't feel like I got that experience last time.
A CHL junior hockey team playing in an NHL-sized arena rarely works, and I'll say this, I know Edmonton and Calgary have had good reputations over the years, of course being owned by the NHL teams. We see it work very well in Quebec because they're absolutely nuts. Edmonton ended up having a very respectable crowd that day. I think it was maybe about 5,000 people, something like that. It's still just, I can't say the atmosphere was overly great. They do what they can. They obviously have all the production values of an NHL team with the video board and all that stuff, but obviously slightly disappointing that it's like going to a Hamilton Bulldogs game, right? It's just, no matter how you got 5,000 people, no matter how loud they are, it's just going to kind of get lost in this giant building.
Yeah, the crazies in Quebec City aside, junior doesn't work in an NHL-sized arena, but I'm still glad that the Oil Kings and the Hitmen are both doing quite well where they're playing, because it is a stronger CHL for having big cities in it, and obviously the Oil Kings do draw well. There was probably, 6,000 people there when we were there, which is a respectable total for a CHL team. I mean, a lot of CHL rinks don't even hold that. I think as you and I were starting to plan our end game towards getting towards all 60, hey, that's the name of this podcast. We were both not wanting to finish on somewhere like Edmonton or Calgary just because of the fact that they were not going to feel like a great junior hockey experience. Edmonton was a way better experience this time. I really enjoyed going there, but it's not Prince George on a Friday night.
And I don't want to piss off the people of southern Alberta, but I think we may have had a better experience at the Oil Kings game than, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the Hitmen game that we went to in the spring or in February of 2023. Like they were good too, but I think the crowd in Edmonton was a bit better. Yeah,
I would say Flames over Oilers, but Oil Kings over Hitmen would be how I'd rank them.
Ooh, so getting people pissed on both sides. I will say,
or happy.
Well, and here, I'll piss off the people of Edmonton. I couldn't help myself. I had to, discreetly, I had to flip off that 2014 Memorial Cup banner.
It's cute that you think people in Edmonton care.
Yeah, good point. A little bit of a shout out. A couple good things. One cool thing I thought the team did on their ceremonial face-off, they brought back, and I didn't catch what player it was, but they brought back an alumni from the 1966 Memorial Cup champion Edmonton Oil Kings, which is technically a different franchise, but this is version 2.0 that's around today. But they brought back someone from that team to do the ceremonial face-off who happens to be the grandfather of a current player. I thought that was pretty cool.
The Oil Kings are kind of like a Cleveland Browns AFC Wimbledon kind of situation here, where they claim to be the original Oil Kings, and they have banners for the original Oil King Memorial Cup championships and everything like that. And good for them, because I don't really give a damn if it's technically a different corporation organization as the team. Like, the Edmonton Oil Kings are the junior hockey team in Edmonton, and they've won the Memorial Cup, and the current team has every right to celebrate that and treat the players who played for those teams as alumni, and I'm glad that they do.
Also cool of the Oil Kings, they heard that we were there, and they decided to put us in some sort of mini game, which you crushed.
Yeah, I was able to guess about how far Lethbridge was away and won a prize pack of shitty Dodge paraphernalia that we left in the hotel room because there wasn't anything worth paying to take home.
So, first trip of the year, knocked out, and I think we were both pretty happy with it. My overall thoughts, if you were to rank all rinks 1 to 60, which we may have to do when we actually get there, but I would imagine at the end of the day, Prince George is going to be kind of right there in the middle. And then Edmonton, for building wise, is obviously it's not fair comparing it to the Bay Shore and Owen Sound, but as far as like junior hockey experience, it would probably be somewhere in the middle as well, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Prince George is definitely middle of the road. Some good things, some bad things about it. And Edmonton, it's a very, very, very nice facility. Like, it's modern NHL grade. It's definitely top half of the NHL. And so on a junior hockey level, you basically can't beat it. I think it's a nicer facility even than Quebec City's is. But as a junior hockey experience, there's better ones out there.
There you go. Let's go back a little bit local, back to Ontario, because we welcomed in, not a new team, but a new old city, I guess. Brantford is back in the OHL, having had a team previously, but not since, 1984. It's been a minute. And yet they're the former Hamilton Bulldogs, now taking up residence in Brantford, playing at the old Brantford Civic, the Civic Center, Civic Auditorium?
Civic Center, yeah.
Civic something. Anyway, we were, I know, both very excited about getting to Brantford because it's an old barn and we love old barns. But you had actually been to that rink once about 20 years ago.
I was there twice, actually, about 20 years ago. Once with my old film camera back when that was still a thing. And then once I got a digital camera, I went back for some interior shots. And Civic Center opened in 1967. It was a centennial project. And when I went there in the early 2000s, it really hadn't been maintained at all. And so it was a dump. Like, the rink I grew up with, the London Gardens, London Ice House, was a dump as well, but it closed in 2002, whereas the Civic Center was still open. And I can remember walking into there for the first time, and there wasn't a single acoustic tile in the lobby for the ceiling that wasn't water damaged, and the building just felt like it was falling apart. And so when I found out almost 20 years later that they were getting an OHL team, I was kind of surprised. Like, that place is going to need a lot of money. But apparently they had actually renovated it quite extensively about 10 years ago. And then the Bulldogs group came in and put a lot more money into it now. So the place sparkles. It's really been brought back to life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I had to say, when I went there, now we should point out, you and I went to separate games, you saw the Knights, I saw the Storm. Hey, we both got to see our team was win, so screw you, Brantford. But when I walked up to it, I don't think I've walked up to a rink that looked so small in the at the junior hockey level. Like, you walk up to small rinks like the Bay Shore and Owen Sound or the Bob and Gatineau, but man, this place from the outside just looks extremely tiny. But I gotta say, with what they had to work with, it's fantastic inside.
Well, it's small on the inside too, right?
Yeah.
The closest comparable for those of you that went and may remember it would be the Oshawa Civic Auditorium. It's a little bit of a higher ceiling, but it's about the same capacity, it's about the same age, and it's about the same design. And, we talk about clone rinks at the CHL level right now, but there has always been clone rinks. And, the 1960s four-corner design of arena construction, basically London's old rink, Oshawa's old rink, Sherbrooke in the Quebec League, and Brantford are all kind of the same in terms of their design. But London had about 1,500 people capacity higher than Brantford did. So it really just kind of felt like the rink I grew up with in a lot of ways, except with a lot fewer rows of seats.
LED lighting and video boards, if the London Gardens had ever made it that far. But
yep.
Going to a game in Brantford was awesome. Fans super loud.
Yep.
Really nothing bad to say about it. Yeah, obviously it's a little cramped, but you're going to get that. And I would say go if you can, because it's not going to last too long. I think we all agree after one season, the Brantford Bulldogs are here to stay, and already the city's talking about building a new, more modern rink pretty much right next door.
Yeah, and I hope that they stay, and the Brantford deserves a place in the OHL. I'm really happy that they're back. I mean, I remember the first time I actually drove into Brantford. This would have been probably 2003 or 4 when I was first going to see the Civic Center, and the whole downtown looked like something out of Silent Hill. Like, it was just a completely deserted ghost town of a city, like really, really sad, economically depressed. And so not that I've never been back there in 20 years, but going back for the Bulldogs game last year, it's like the whole city has rebounded. It's just booming. There's jobs, there's population growth. It's time for it to come back. It was time for it to come back to the OHL. And I don't foresee them ever leaving as long as they get that new rink built.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fans there, awesome, treating them great. So hope to see the Brantford Bulldogs around for a while. And like I said, get to that rink while you can, because I'd imagine, assuming the team is still there 5 years from now, that they're probably going to be in a new rink. So
And if you want to wander around, do it before or after the game, because you will not be able to get around during the intermissions. And don't drink anything either, because you don't want to need a bathroom.
No, that's true. Bathrooms, you have to, if you're sitting down in row 1, you actually have to go all the way up to the concourse, like up to the top row, and then go back downstairs. So it's a bit of a trek, but like you said, you have some limitations with when you're working with.
That's what I grew up with, so that seems normal to me.
Yeah. Also, a shout out to the big lounge that they have over at the one side. I think it's on the bench side of the rink. There's a big lounge in behind there, and I thought that was really cool. More team store area. So good on Brantford for getting that done. After Brantford, we both got there kind of in the just about a month or so after we did the BC Edmonton trip. Now this trip you weren't on with me, but I'll get your input on some of these rinks because I was getting to them for the first time. I made a pretty epic drive out to the Maritimes to get the QMJHL done. I had 4 rinks left, and they were all in the Maritimes. The only ones I had knocked off out there previously were Bathurst and Halifax. So I went out to Charlottetown, Cape Breton, St. John, and Moncton to finish off the league. My first stop was Charlottetown, and I remember all last summer when I had these plans, you couldn't wait to hear what I thought of Charlottetown because you have them ranked as currently your worst rink in the CHL, I believe.
Yeah, I will publish, once we get to all 60, I will publish a all 60 ranking, and I have a list on my phone, and I keep moving things around as I think of things and all that, but it pretty consistently, ever since I went there, which for me was March of 2006, I have had Charlottetown Civic Center as the absolute last on my list. Part of the reason for that is it is not a very well-designed rink. OHL fans who remember Plymouth, it's kind of similar. Like, the seats are way too shallow, the goal horn is way too loud, it's hard to get around in, but it's also a new building, like early 90s it was built, so it doesn't have any old building charm or anything about it. It's just badly designed in a lot of ways. But also, I went during the Rocket time, and the Rocket was owned by an absentee owner who didn't care about PEI and didn't put any money into it. So it was sort of sad and depressing from that perspective as well. And it was gratifying to hear from you that at least that has changed now that they have local ownership.
Yeah, so, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like you said, it's a bad designed rink. Like you said, think Plymouth, but somehow worse because it doesn't have the wide concourses of Plymouth and whatnot. But, it just getting around under the seats, I find it to be a little bit of a cluster, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But they've added a few things since you've been there. They've got a few suites now. They got the video board, all that stuff, but they're trying to make it, update it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But like one bad thing...
I was there when it was 15 years old, and it felt old. Like,
right.
and like obviously built on the cheap.
Right. And one, I think the most terrible thing, you mentioned the shallow seats, but like if you sit in behind the nets, you can't even fully see the net. Like you can kind of see the top half of it. You can't see the crease. I'm sure if, they've had a finals run before, they've packed it a few times, but I'm sure when you're playing for a league championship, people will just pack in, they don't care. But for a regular season game and you have the option to sit somewhere else, please do it. I sat kind of at the blue line, it was all right. But the biggest saving grace for the rink, I think, is the people. And it's not exactly like a rockin' packed house or anything. It was very small crowd, but man, are the people ever nice down there.
Yeah, and that was the same for me too. Like I really couldn't, as much as I didn't like the Civic Center and as much as it was not the greatest hockey experience I've ever had, to say the least, the people there were wonderful. And it was the one saving grace of going to a game in Charlottetown and the one reason I'd be interested in going back.
And, of course, now, since those PEI Rocket days that you mentioned, they have new local ownership. They have a much better branding. They are the Charlottetown Islanders. Kind of a strange color style that I'm sure not everyone loves, but I like it because it's unique with that kind of black and gold look. And I know black and yellow is used a lot, but I don't know. It seems nice with Charlottetown. And the word just came out in the last, 6 months or so that this place is They've decided not to build new. There had been rumors that maybe they would get something new, but Kevin, they're going for the let's do a massive renovation route.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it turns out and maybe someday make a trip back there to evaluate it. The one thing about it is the location is very good. Like, it's within walking distance of downtown, a bit of a hike, but not too far. Again, there's parking nearby because it's on the fairgrounds. There's that thing again. Really, there's not a better location in a compact old historic city than where it currently is. So, yeah, I mean, I can see it, and hopefully they do a better job making it into something spectacular because they certainly didn't do a good job the first time.
Plus, right next door, you can go bet on the ponies, so that's always a plus. And speaking of gambling at intermissions, my next rink was a place that you can actually do that as well. Made my way over to Cape Breton Island, Sydney, Nova Scotia, Center 200, home of the Cape Breton Eagles. I was excited for this place. It was actually the first ever rink in the CHL, or outside of the OHL, that I visited. I was on the island in 2010, didn't get to go to a game, but I did get to go into the arena, check it out then. It had just gotten a renovation back then, so now it's not too much different. My game, not a big crowd again, unfortunately. I think we was only about 1,800 people there. For the people that were there, it was good. For those who don't know, Cape Breton kind of has it's kind of like Ottawa, there's way more seats on one side of the building than there is on the other, but at the same time, pretty functional building. And I know over the years they've had good crowds. What was your experience down there like, Kevin?
It was basically the same. Like, I was there in October. Like, we sort of went down for the week and did a lot of touring around, did the Cabot Trail and everything, with everything in fall color. So it was a cool experience to get to go there. And again, people in Sydney are wonderful, like East Coast hospitality and everything. But the building was half empty, maybe a little more than half empty. It was kind of a quiet crowd, really generically nondescript. The only real thing to say about it that made it stand out for me was it's, I think, the only Quebec League rink that I've been to that really just sort of felt like it could be in Ontario, at least in the sense that there was no French announcements. It just sort of felt like being back home in a lot of ways, which was kind of interesting because, when you're seeing a game in New Brunswick, even if you're in a predominantly English-speaking city like St. John, it still very much feels like a Quebec League game with the bilingual announcements and everything, and Cape Breton didn't have that.
No, they don't. I was disappointed, again, not a huge atmosphere, but I will say it seemed like right after that game I went to last October that the atmosphere and the attendance started getting much better at Cape Breton. Now, it helped that they had a good team for once last year. This is a team that can never get out of that middle area, which is always the worst place to be. You're never good enough to compete for championships, but you're never bad enough to properly rebuild. Cape Breton had a really good team last year. They went to the Final Four in the QMJHL. They packed that place in the playoffs, and even before the playoffs, like in the regular season, they were packing that place in the second half. And from what I heard, they're supposed to have a really good team again this year. So I would love to get back there one day for a packed house crowd. So Patrick, if you're listening, cook me up, please. But yeah, a fun time in Cape Breton, but it's kind of an older building. I would say once again, maybe not quite as high as the middle, kind of like down that 2/3 of the way down the list. But I drove directly from Sydney all the way to St. John, which was kind of within the trip, was the longest travel. Now, St. John has always had a really good reputation, not only is for a team that hasn't been around all that long. They're still been around less than 20 years. They're coming up on their 20th birthday soon. But this is a team that has had great success. They've won 2 Memorial Cups. I think they've won 2 or 3 QMJHL titles. They're a team that's always either really good or really bad, but their home has a little bit of history to it, Kevin, and as far as Q rinks go, it's on the bigger side.
Yeah. So the very brief history in St. John, the AHL started out in, I believe, the late 70s in the east coast of Canada. And there was teams all over the East Coast. There, like the Nova Scotia Voyageurs, Cape Breton Oilers, PEI Senators at one point, Moncton Hawks, I think, was one. Just 2 things that I guess I point out with this. The first one is that there was a team in Fredericton, which we'd all love to see a Fredericton-based team in the Quebec League these days, but there was a team in Fredericton called the Fredericton Express, which had the greatest team nickname ever, FredEx. But
I I'd not heard that before.
But anyway, St. John was last, and so I had recommended that when you went out there, you check it out, and I don't think you did, but Lord Beaverbrook Rink is the old arena in St. John. Mid-century modern glass masterpiece. Like, it's kind of feels, it's very different, but it kind of has that Portland Coliseum vibe to it a little bit, like all the glass windows and everything, big open windows, lots of natural light in it. But it's too small for the AHL, and so they really needed to build Harbor Station, which opened in '93, if I remember right, to have a shot at the AHL. And so because they were the last ones to get an AHL team, they were also the last to lose it. Other than, I think St. John's Newfoundland was actually dead last, but St. John Flames were one of the last teams to go. And so they were also one of the last teams to join the Quebec League, and they made up for lost time very quickly by winning everything there was to win. And then doing it again.
Well, I got to say, I really like their rink. It's kind of reminds me of like a slightly better Red Deer arena. You know, now I'm losing my train of thought as far as what their name was called in what the rink's name was called in Red Deer. But you know what I mean? Red Deer, Regina, a little bit of Lethbridge. It's kind of like that in St. John on a bigger scale with like one full bowl seating and like a U-shaped bowl as an upper bowl.
Yeah, and a wide open concourse sort of separating them so you can see the game from anywhere. It's a well laid out, well thought out building. I liked it. It was sort of from that weird design standpoint where it was just transitioning from coliseums to modern entertainment centers, and so it's got a little bit of both. It does kind of in places feel a little bit like an old 80s coliseum, and it does feel in a lot of other ways like it's modern brand new clone rink. So it was neat to see.
They do a heck of a lot of promotions, and I know that doesn't sound different than most other teams across the CHL. Someone, listening goes, well, my team does a lot of promotions, but man, the amount of theme nights that this team had lined up, it was like minor pro in the States what they had. But the night we were there, they were having a rap concert, and they did it at first and second intermissions. Like, they had a stage because they don't use, in one of the ends, they don't use all the seating there. They kind of have like a ringside bar area set up, which is something you're seeing at a lot more rinks these days. And then they had built a stage up kind of like at the top of the lower bowl in that one end, and they had a local rapper, I think it was, I'm not sure, it's not my scene really, but he put on like a full concert at each of the intermissions to the point where he was actually still going when the teams hit the ice again, which was a little awkward, but and they even I've not seen this before, they actually extended the intermissions. They're normally supposed to be, I think, 15 minutes and 16 minutes. This was like full 20-minute intermissions both times. But give credit to the people trying to run the promotions in St. John. They're trying. And,
we talked about Prince George being a mom and pop shop, and St. John is whatever the opposite is. They're a full-on professional show, and there's a reason that they win. It's because they put money into promotions. They put money into the whole experience. It's pro in miniature, just like London, just like Rimouski, just like a few other places we've been to.
I gotta say, the setting for the building is very nice. It's not, as far as geographically is concerned, I didn't really get to check out. St. John was the town on this trip that I got to see the least, because the next day my game was in Moncton, so that night's hotel was in Moncton. So St. John was really just kind of an in and out for the game itself. But you go up on that one hill by the rink, and man, just that picture of the arena is just, it looks so good.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool setting, and right downtown, but sort of on the outskirts of downtown, so there's parking nearby, and like they've got weatherproof bridges coming in from downtown because it is a very hilly city, so that you can get your parking garage indoors and in the warmth on cold nights in winter, which is always appreciated.
Kind of reminds me a little bit of Niagara in that sense. But last on the trip was Moncton, and this is, I believe, the newest rink in the QMJHL. And at this point, maybe the CHL. I'm just trying to go through my Rolodex in my mind here. But rink just opened a couple years before the pandemic hit. The Avonare Center. The old Moncton Coliseum was a rink that I'm jealous you got to before me. You got to, and I essentially didn't. I got to see it on this trip, but just as an empty building that still has ice, but is probably not going to be around much longer. You actually got to see a Wildcats game at the old Coliseum.
Yeah, the Coliseum was interesting because it was built in the early 70s, and so you'd think just by age alone that it wouldn't have been time to shut it down. But the way that they designed it, it was a very, very low ceiling. It was set underground, a lot of it. Like, when you entered at ground level and then the ice was down from there. And it was one of those rinks that had like a full bowl in the lower seating area and then a massive sort of second tier grandstand only on the one side. And then with that and the low ceiling, it made it so that there was no real good way to have concerts there or other events. And the lighting was just awful. Like, I have pictures on my website where you can just see the shadows being cast all over the place and everything.
So yeah, they build brand new and the new Avanair Center downtown, and man, it is everything the Coliseum is not. Like, Kevin, we've talked about this before amongst ourselves, but we, now we'll tell the world this is probably the best purely junior hockey rink, not just in the CHL, but maybe in the world.
Yeah, for my money, it's the best junior rink in the country, at least as a facility.
Yes.
It's all one level. It's like just under 9,000 seats and steep seating bowl, great facilities right downtown. You can see where all the money they spent on building it went. It would just be a spectacular place to watch a game week in, week out, except for the fact that it's in Moncton and it's full of Moncton Wildcats fans, and they don't show up in great numbers most of the time. And when they do, they're pretty quiet. So, the atmosphere is pretty lacking in there, but it is a spectacular facility.
Yeah, unfortunately, the game I was at, and I think it's pretty similar for you, I only had probably, it was less than, or maybe about 3,000 people. They collapse a bunch of the seating in the one end. Again, kind of have, now what I mentioned earlier, that so many rinks are putting in like these rinkside bars for in areas where seating isn't used a lot. In Moncton, they kind of go the other way with it. They make it like a kids zone, like they put in a bouncy castle and all that stuff, which I'm sure, hey, the parents can go, hey, go play over there for a while. So, parents probably liking that just as much as a rinkside bar, I'd imagine, and it's probably cheaper too. But yeah, like you said, not a great atmosphere. It's just too big for junior hockey, but they didn't do that on purpose. Like, there was a reasoning behind that because of the hub city.
They did do it on purpose, yeah. Because, like, Moncton, for those of you who aren't from the area, Moncton is hub city of the Maritimes. Any population center in the Maritimes is within a, like, say, a three and a bit hours drive of Moncton. And so what you'd see happening over the past several decades before the building of the Avanair Center is a lot of touring acts would go as far east as maybe Montreal or Boston or maybe Quebec City, but they wouldn't go any farther east because from those places it's a good solid day's driving out to Halifax, and if they're only playing one show in Halifax, it's not worth the travel time to get out there. But if you can convince some act that they're going to play two shows and that they can sell tickets to those two shows, then maybe it's worth it for them to come out. And as mentioned, the Moncton Coliseum was a terrible building for anything except for hockey. And so the Avanair Center was designed to lure in large touring shows. And, now they can get Cirque du Soleil, and they can get trade shows, and they can get, concerts by big name acts. I'm trying to think of who would be a big name act that would play Moncton. I know the Rolling Stones played there years ago, although that wasn't at the Avanair Center. Could they get Taylor Swift? Probably not. But, the second tier of places, acts that can sell out an 8,000 seat arena might actually consider going out there right now. So that's why Moncton did it, and it makes perfect sense that they did, and it was the right decision for the city. But unless the Wildcats really start going on a tear and doing really well, it is probably too big of a building for the market for hockey.
I'm sure at some point they're going to get to host a Memorial Cup out of this, and hey, a lot of seats usually means cheaper tickets, so I like that. But best comparable I can think of is it's like the WFCU Center in Windsor if the one giant end in Windsor was an entire bowl. That's what it feels like. Like you mentioned, seating is really steep. They kind of have, it's weird, they put all the suites on one side and they stack them on top of each other, kind of like the Phillips Arena in Atlanta. That's what it reminded me of anyway.
Yeah, I've not been in there, but I definitely, from pictures, it does look kind of like that.
Yeah, so, hey, I was happy to finish off the QMJHL, all 18 finally after...
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. It only took, if you don't count my game at the Colisée in 2015 at the Memorial Cup, my first QMJHL rink after that was in 2018 when we did Rimouski and the other rinks in far eastern Quebec. So it took me only 5 years to get it done, and that's with a pandemic in there. So I think that I did pretty good. While we're on that subject, and I know we're going back to not from last season, but what was your all 18 in the Q, Kev?
Mine was, I guess it depends. I consider your all 20 or your all 18 or your all 22 moment to be when you've seen every team play at home, even if there's still buildings outstanding. And so for me, I considered my all 18 to be Sherbrooke. They were the last Q team that I saw play at home. We did a 3-and-3 weekend trip in, I guess last season, not this past season that's just ended, but the one before that, where I knocked off Shawinigan, where I'd been before, and Quebec, where I'd been before, and then Sherbrooke, where I hadn't. And so I loved the Sherbrooke. It's one of my favorite junior rinks I've ever been to. And it was a perfect all 18 to finish on. My grandfather was born in Sherbrooke, or well, East Bolton, but not too far from there. So even though I don't have family in the area anymore, it really felt like coming home in a lot of ways. And so it was a great experience going out there. But in terms of the first time I was able to say I've done all 18 current, that was last January when I got to Gatineau's new rink.
Yeah, I echo your comments about Sherbrooke. It was awesome. I loved it. One of my higher ranked Q buildings. So wouldn't mind going back there. And I guess it's one of the closer ones to Ontario. So I could see myself definitely going to another game there at some point. Or if we found out one day that they were going to build a new one in Sherbrooke, I think I would make a point of going to one more at the old Palace de la Sports. That's
Palais des Sports.
I don't French too well, but we move on.
That's not what I've heard.
Yeah. There we go. We move on from the Q. We're going to head back out west. And Kevin, you and I had a pretty unique scenario last season. So when it comes to the Eastern Conference of the WHL, by this point, February of 2024, you and I each were missing one arena from the Eastern Conference in the dub, but they were different rinks. I was missing Brandon, you were missing Saskatoon, while the other person had been there.
Yep.
So we needed these outliers to get done. And on our own separately, we've realized, okay, I'm going to go, I thought I'm going to go to Brandon on this day. It works for me. And you figured, well, I'm going to go to Saskatoon on this day. It works for me. And it just so happened we were at those games at the same time.
Yeah. So Flair Airlines flies to Saskatoon for some reason. And I sort of figured at the start of the year that at some point during this year, I will be crazy enough to go to Saskatoon in winter, and no one else is going to want to do this. So the flights won't be that expensive. And I mean, not that the money's a huge deal, but if we're doing an outlier where really you're flying in for one day and seeing a game and coming home again, like that's a heck of an undertaking.
You don't want to spend $1,000 on just a one-off.
Yeah. Like when I did Brandon, it was part of an epic road trip where I actually got 6 dub rinks in one road trip. Those 6 rinks were Brandon, Everett, Seattle, Kelowna, Regina, and Red Deer. So like that was a heck of a road trip. Whereas going all the way out to Saskatoon for one game just seemed like, if I'm going to do this, it's going to have to be economical. And sure enough, I got a flight deal. Obviously, fees and taxes are always an issue when you're buying flight tickets in Canada, but my actual fare, like the cost of just the airline, what Flair made by flying me out to Saskatoon, considering I did not pay for any upgrades, did not pay for my seat, did not bring any luggage or anything like that, just a backpack, which was free. They made $1.24 for a flight from Toronto to Saskatoon.
Literally a bus with wings.
Yep. Except you can't ride the Hamilton bus for $1.25.
No, it's $3.50. So it's actually it was cheaper for you to fly to Saskatoon than to ride on my bus. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I was in Brandon on the same day, and I went out. It cost me a little bit more, but at the same time, I kind of made a weekend out of it because I went to Brandon and Winnipeg. Obviously, not just to fly in and out of Winnipeg, but I did a Jets game out of it. We'll talk about that.
Well, you also can't fly into Winnipeg anyway, so.
Well, yes, they don't have an airport. I flew to Manitoba, let's put it that way. One thing I wanted to touch on just really quick here was Wayne Fleming Arena. You and I, neither of us actually got to a game there, but we have both now seen it. I made a point of stopping in there. That, I can't believe in the 2020s era of the CHL, a team played there for a few years.
Yeah, it sounds like the owners, I mean, I'll be careful what I say here in case they listen to this, but like it sounds like there was a little bit of the snake oil salesman about them, and that they were coming in and over-promising and under-delivering. And sure, maybe the pandemic entered into that a little bit. I know a lot of business plans that people had didn't come to fruition because of the COVID. But yeah, they came in talking a big game about how they were going to build a brand new CHL-sized rink in southwestern Winnipeg, and then obviously that never happened. And from the stories, it sounds like the Dub made them sell the team and get rid of it so that they would not be playing at a completely inadequate college rink.
Yeah. I moved on to Brandon, and I was really looking forward to this. Brandon, Manitoba, the Brandon Wheat Kings, they're one of those teams that no matter where you are, if you're aware of the CHL, even if you're in the O or in the Q, you know about them. Everyone knows about the Brandon Wheat Kings or the Kelowna Rockets or the London Knights or the Rimouski, Oceanic, Halifax Mooseheads, what have you. I was really excited to get to a game there. But man, my biggest complaint about this, and it has nothing to do with the rink, you can't get a team puck with their classic logo on it. They have this new secondary logo with just their initials, BWK. Ugh, Brandon, get proper logo pucks, please.
Maybe they will this year. Not that you'll find out. But yeah, it's just, I collect pucks. Every rink I go to, I buy a puck. And you'd think it would be hockey marketing 101 that you'd be able to, every team would sell a puck with the team's logo on it. And so many teams, even at the NHL level, fail at that. I did the UBS Arena in New York, where the Islanders now play, last December, and it was the Islanders' 50th anniversary season, and they did not sell any pucks with just the Islanders logo on it. It was just the 50th anniversary logo. So
the rink itself really reminds me of Owen Sound, not just because they have red seats, which I guess that's out of date now because this summer they tore out all the old seats and they have new ones in Brandon. So, I haven't seen a picture of all the new ones yet, but regardless, when I was there and for many years, they had like not only those, the same red colored seats as they have in Owen Sound, but it's like that same, in Owen Sound, the seats are a different shape than they are anywhere else in the OHL. And it's just unique to me. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. But not only that, their press boxes in Brandon are like the exact same ones they have in Owen Sound, like the same like prefab little corrugated steel box. It was the weirdest thing, but
and it's just as dark and it's just as forbidding, and like they're clones of each other in a sense. They're not really actually that similar in terms of the way that the buildings are laid out and everything like that. Brandon's definitely bigger, but they have that same sort of dank pit feeling to them, and that is definitely a compliment.
Nobody wants to watch a game in a dank pit no more.
You ain't thinking of getting rid of the dank, are you, Mo?
Maybe I am.
Oh, but Mo, the dank! The dank!
Except us. I love watching a game in a dank pit.
Absolutely. It's the best thing ever.
I liked Brandon a lot. Great team store. It wasn't, again, a big trend I had last year, unfortunately. The atmosphere wasn't overly great. There was 2,500 people there. They cheered when they scored and when there were big hits and stuff. And they were happy that the hometown team won at the end of the night, but it wasn't like, constant chanting or anything. Hey, it's a game in the middle of, or in early February. I get it. They're there to watch hockey. But I did enjoy my time in Brandon, and I assume you did as well.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the home opener there for the Wheat Kings back in that season, and it was definitely a bigger crowd. It was pretty much sold out, but it was still not. It wasn't a Quebec crowd, I'll say that. Like it was, they were into the game. They were very knowledgeable, very, very nice, very welcoming, but it wasn't the best atmosphere I've ever had.
So while I'm there. And it's crazy. We're texting each other. You're in Saskatoon, I'm in Brandon, and we're texting each other about our experiences at the rink, which is, we do that when one person's on, but it's so weird when we're both at games at the same time. The trend that I've been talking about here is, okay crowds, nothing great. While I was in Brandon and you were in Saskatoon, out in Saskatoon, you were getting a great crowd.
Oh, it was fantastic, yeah. I really like old school NHL-sized rinks, and I've actually tried to make a point of seeing the very few of them that are left. Like last year, this will be a subject of another podcast episode, but we did an ECHL game in Cincinnati, which still has 1970s Nassau Coliseum clone down there where the ECHL team plays, and the SaskTel Center is kind of like that. Like it holds 15,000, something like that. It's hardly ever opened. I think they've only ever sold out once for the Bedard show, like 2 years ago, but it was a great experience nonetheless. Like the lower bowl was basically sold out. The Blades were the best team in the CHL at the time in the regular season, and it was a great atmosphere. It was a really good experience.
As you mentioned, old school. The Saskatoon Blues were almost a thing. That's why that rink was built in the first place. But a little bit of a pipe dream, it's basically a Cops Coliseum of the prairies. But
it's smaller than Cops Coliseum too, though. Like Cops is at least 2,000 seats larger, and like it just feels bigger as well. Like not that Cops feels huge. Like Cops felt smaller than the Joe Louis Arena did, but SaskTel Center is 15,000 seats instead of 18,000, and you can tell when you're inside it.
I feel the difference in those. I think the lower bowl in Saskatoon's a bit smaller than the one in Hamilton. Yeah. But, my experience, I was there for Memorial Cup. I've not done an actual Blades game there. Unfortunately, even though it was a Memorial Cup and they had the whole rink open and we got really cheap packages, $150 for a whole Memorial Cup package, but we sat in the second last row behind the press box. It just was never full, even for the final game, which was between Halifax and Portland, and it was the Nathan McKinnon versus Seth Jones show. It was amazing hockey to watch, but even its biggest attended game of the tournament, which I think was 11,000 people, there were still giant areas of open seating, even in the lower bowl. So, it never got too overly crazy at that tournament for me. So I think you saw a better version. And when you got to see proper Saskatoon, you got to see the blue and yellow Pac-Man logo, classic Saskatoon Blades, whereas I saw the two-tone blue skate blade version of the team, which, yuck. Nothing, two-tone blue can work, but with the Blades, man, that blue and yellow is fantastic.
It's such a classic jersey, and their identity, like you had that, why would you ever trade away from it? It's so good.
Yeah. Good experience. But Saskatoon's a pretty good rink. I think you had said it once as, well, it's not quite the size of an NHL building. For CHL teams that play in NHL-sized buildings, you'd consider it one of the best situations, no?
Yeah, again, Quebec's kind of on its own level because they actually will sell out an 18,000-seat rink for a junior hockey game, which is insanity. But out of the others that I've seen, past and present, that play in NHL-sized rinks, Saskatoon's my favorite, and probably has a lot to do with the fact that it does feel kind of old school and unrenovated and a bit run down in a good way. Probably something to do with the fact that it's so much smaller than like Rogers Place, for example. But yeah, it was a good experience. I wish I hadn't had to fly 2,000 kilometers round trip each way, I should say, for an outlier, but if I had to do it, I'm glad it was for that and not for something like the Mississauga Ice Dogs.
There you go.
Take that, Tozer.
Take that, Don Cherry. We'll move on to the final CHL-related trip of the season. Now, you were done at that point for the year as far as the CHL is concerned. I managed to squeeze in one more trip, but you can definitely give in your thoughts about these places, as all three rinks I'm about to bring up you have been to, I think, since the pandemic, so pretty close in terms of that. I managed to sneak in a trip in early March where I got to go to Everett, Vancouver, and Kelowna with a couple days in between in visiting family in the Whistler area. I want to talk about Everett first because it was the first one on my trip. So obviously the comparable has to be made that the Angel of the Winds Arena in Everett, which is a crazy name, you got to compare. The first comparable you think of right away is Bud Gardens in London.
Yeah, I mean, there's definite noticeable differences. They're about the same capacity and about the same layout, but Everett has a feeling a little bit to me like it's got some design cues from the Coliseum era in the 80s, and that like if there's only one concourse and every portal has like stairs up to the upper level or straight out to the lower level. Whereas Bud Gardens is definitely more, even though they were opened a year apart from each other, it's got the double concourse. Like once you go up the escalator to the upstairs level, you don't have a reason generally to come down, and you're not really encouraged to come back down again. I definitely was a little bit jealous of your Everett experience because I saw the Silvertips on a Sunday afternoon while the Seahawks were playing in October, and it was still a pretty good atmosphere, but the building was about half full, whereas you saw the full-on Everett experience.
Yeah, it holds about 8,000 people, so also just maybe a tiny bit smaller than Bud Gardens. But I got to go for a Saturday night game at the beginning of March when the team was battling for a division title. Wasn't sold right out, but it was probably about 85% full. And man, those fans make a heck of a lot of noise. They really love cowbells for some reason, which I haven't quite made that connection other than just that's a thing in hockey, but
they've got a fever.
Yeah, and there's only one prescription for that fever, and it's winning a WHL championship, which they've yet to do. Sorry, Everett. You'll get there eventually. Everett, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I would put it top 3 experience in the WHL for a game. It was a little bummed out being there alone, but I got, there were some people that came up and talked to me throughout the game. It was really cool, and they heard about where I was from and visiting, so that's always one of the really cool things about traveling across the CHL. But Everett was awesome, and I really hope now that they've opened the Memorial Cup bidding status back up to U.S. teams that Everett goes for it one day, because with it being close proximity to Seattle, I think they would do a fantastic job hosting out there.
Yeah, I think they're the best candidate city out there that has never hosted, for my money. Just the 8,000 seat rink, the fact that they're in a big market, but they have their own fan base, and there's like lots of hotels and stuff nearby. Like and also like, you were surprised to learn this until you actually made the drive, but like Everett's from downtown Vancouver, it's only about maybe 2 and a bit hours. Like, you could bring in, especially if you happen to luck out and have maybe like the Giants or even like the Victoria Royals make it to the Memorial Cup that year, like you could very easily have like an OHL style Memorial Cup where you've got lots of visiting fans making the trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they get that one day. Angel the Winds Arena, very awesome. Really nice setting area too. The town of Everett, a little bit more upscale, I would say, suburb of Seattle. Just everything all around, just fantastic. Next day, I drove back up to the Vancouver area, but it was to Langley, because as we know, the Vancouver Giants don't actually play in Vancouver anymore, and that old rink, the Coliseum, I know is one that's still high on your to-do list if the Giants ever play there again, which they, since they left, have played the odd game there for teddy bear tosses.
They haven't since the pandemic, though, and their last teddy bear toss game before the pandemic, they actually finally played a game at Rogers Place, which 2019 was the first ever CHL game where the Canucks play, which is crazy considering that it opened in 1995. Yeah, I have family in Vancouver. My sister-in-law lives there, and I've got a place to stay for free. So if ever play another game at Pacific Coliseum, I'm going to go. I decided that years ago, but we'll see if it ever happens.
Well, the Vancouver Giants now play out in Langley, BC, about 45 minutes or so from downtown Vancouver. Basically a clone rink, but I think you and I both agree, probably one of, if not the best clone rink in the CHL, because first thing that struck me when you're outside of it, it doesn't look like a clone. The lot of woodwork, it's another one of those, this place screams BC.
Yeah, very BC architecture, a lot of like exposed wood throughout the building, both interior and exterior. It sort of resembles, I think this is on purpose, but almost like native lodge type architectural cues. I don't know if it's fair to say that. Other than the fact it's in a parking lot in a suburb, like it definitely feels like it's extremely BC.
Yeah, like the neighborhood itself feels like you could be in Mississauga or something, but at the same time, the rink itself is great. It is your just standard clone design, about 5,000 seats, top-down concourse. I gotta say, the concourse, food and beverage options, though, are pretty elite compared to most just regular clone rinks. They have a Triple O's in there.
Yeah, we have Triple O's in Ontario now. They've just started opening. There's one in Waterdown, apparently. I haven't been to the Ontario ones yet. But for those of you who don't know, they're a BC-based fast food chain that's kind of on the elite level, along with like In-N-Out and Five Guys and stuff like that, Culver's. So check it out if you're ever in BC or Waterdown.
One kind of unique quirk about Vancouver's building, I noticed in the one end, they actually have like suites stacked on top of each other. Like at one area, it goes like almost right to the roof.
Yeah, and like I think I liked it a little more than you did, but for my money, I think that for a CHL that has so many clone ranks, like a good quarter of the CHL minimum is clones these days, I think that Langley's is probably the best one, and I'd call it the second best clone I've ever done. We'll get into this probably a little bit on a future podcast episode, but I think Toledo in Ohio in the CHL has been the best clone rank I've ever done. But in a CHL context, Langley's a very close second.
As far as clones in the CHL go, I think I like Gatineau and Oshawa, both a little bit better, but I do have high praise for Vancouver. I thought it was a great experience. They have kind of that extra room up front where the day I was there was being used for kind of a charity auction, but it kind of reminded me of that high up lobby that they have in Prince Albert as well.
A little bit, yeah.
And also kind of noticed, too, as you walk down the one side, I think it was on the bench side of the rink, there were windows leading into other facilities that are connected to the Langley Event Center. There was like a full basketball court. And one other odd thing, they have 2 retired numbers for the Vancouver Giants, and they're for people that never played for the team.
Yeah, I forget the one, but I know the one is Gordie Howe, which is weird. He owned the team. He did own the team for years. Like there was a connection, but like
Pat Quinn was the other one.
Pat Quinn was the other one. Yeah.
So, but good experience in Vancouver, and hey, people out in the suburbs of Vancouver, go check out the Giants. I'm sure it'd be a good time for you.
Well, they do well too, though. Like I mean, we are used to in an OHL context having teams out in Brampton and Mississauga struggling for survival, and that's not the case in Langley. It doesn't matter that they're a suburban team playing in a parking lot clone rink. Like they do pretty well out there.
Yeah, no, I should mention that. Even though they were kind of a mid-level team last year, this was near the playoffs, but they had a pretty good crowd when I was there. It was a Sunday afternoon, so a lot more families there. I'm not sure what your crowd was like, but it was pretty full the day I was there.
I would say what you just described is exactly what I had as well.
There you go. The family-friendly option in the Vancouver area, not Canucks prices.
It was also the only time and place I've ever met one Jamie Tozer, the one and only guy that I'm aware of who's been to all 60.
Yes.
We happened to bump into each other at that game, and it was good to meet him.
The only person who may be crazier than we are?
Yes. He's now trying to complete college, I believe, which, I mean... some college rinks are cool, but I have no interest in going to see a game in Western Michigan or Union College.
Yeah, we've stopped in at a couple in our travels, and some are cool, and some are just like, this is nothing. So
yeah.
So after that, I had a couple days. I mentioned I visited family in the Whistler area before doing a Wednesday night game in Kelowna to finish off the trip. And my trip from Whistler to Kelowna was pretty damn epic. The drive, once I got outside of and east of Pemberton, I had several hours with no cell coverage, and it's not really like a super main highway either, so very few other cars on the road, very little traffic. But it was such a cool experience. I was going high up into the mountains, and especially, I think the area by Mount Seton and Seton Lake was just so gorgeous. I wish I had more pictures of it, but I was the only one on this trip, and I was the driver, so I didn't want to drive off a cliff or anything.
I haven't done that drive. I've been I've done the Crow's Nest Highway across BC, and I've done the Trans-Canada across BC, and I've driven like Merritt to Kelowna and Merritt to Kamloops and stuff. So I've seen a lot of really amazing mountain scenery out there, but I haven't been up that way, so it would be cool to see someday.
Well, and once I got past the Seton Lake lookout, the highway kind of turns more southeast, and I'm going along the Fraser River, and there were areas where I'm like, it's like the road really narrowed up. I had to stop a few times because of like mountain goats and stuff in the middle of the road, and just a really cool trip. Did go through the town or almost former town of Lytton. That town burned to the ground I think 3 years ago, and it was really odd seeing this town that's basically been almost wiped off the map, but they've kind of cleared out all the damage and debris, and the streets still exist, and they've put in like the new road signs, and the road signs all look pristine and stuff, and it's just empty lots for everywhere. It was kind of odd and crazy to see, and that's just, I was reading up before this podcast about Lytton, and highest temperature ever recorded in Canada was there, 49.9 degrees Celsius. Just insane. But still, just an absolutely gorgeous drive down through the Merritt area. And then I remember coming into Kelowna, you come down a mountain coming into it. I think I threw the rental car in neutral and didn't have to take it out for at least 10 minutes as you just coast down into West Kelowna.
Yeah, that's an epic descent. You were on the Pennask Road?
Yes.
From the Penasque Summit? Yeah,
Yes.
that's a hell of a drive. Like, because you're basically going up and over the Penasque Mountain. I forget what the elevation is, but it's a lot. And then,
they do have a sign when you get to the top.
The summit,
Yeah.
But then, like, all the way down, like, it's just, you just keep dropping and dropping and dropping. And, it's very easy. Like, when I try really hard not to ride the brakes, I do know how to hill drive and all that. And, use engine braking when you can. But, like, I have also, admittedly, like, just put the car in neutral and then you let it get up to, like, well, I mean, your mileage may vary because you didn't do it in dry, fall conditions or whatever. But, let it get up to, like, 160 and then break down to 80 and then let it build up to 160 again all the way down the hill.
When I got down that hill, I found myself in Kelowna for the first time in my life. Very beautiful setting. I can see why people enjoy it there. But when I got there, the rink in question, Prospera Place, somewhat new rink, even though now it's one of those, it's hit its 25th birthday, and it's hard to imagine rinks from the late 90s are that old now. But I could see when this place opened, probably like state of the art as far as the CHL is concerned. But as the years have gone on, it kind of feels like it's not a dump by any means, but at the same time, it's starting to feel really out of date.
Yeah, as far as, I mean, obviously I never went there in the late 90s, but nothing has changed as far as I'm aware. Like, they opened the doors for the first time in the late 90s, and it's still the same rink. Like, still the same seats, still the same paint. Like, it's almost like you can sort of see how deferring routine maintenance can start aging a building as you start getting past the 20th birthday. And I know that they were supposed to host the 2020 Memorial Cup, which obviously never happened. And then when they went to bid for the next round, they were basically told, you guys need to put some more money into this building before we'll let you consider bidding, which seems kind of crazy on the surface. But having been to a game there, I kind of get it. Like, it's very much has that feeling like it could use just some routine maintenance. Like, not even that there's any one specific thing to criticize, just fix everything, paint everything, clean everything, get it back up into, like, new condition again.
I gotta say, it might be the most ancient scoreboard in the CHL at this point.
It might be, yeah.
It's
Victoria's
kind of awful.
up there too, but yeah.
That said, I was impressed with the crowd for considering it was a Wednesday night in a year where Kelowna was not that great. A lot of people came out to the game. Rink wasn't like totally full, but it was at least about 2/3 of the way full. Good atmosphere, good crowd. If the Memorial Cup ever does go back to Kelowna, which I'm sure it will at some point when they get these renovations done, and hopefully that just makes the building better. I think it's a solid rink, but at the end of the day, it is a clone. It's kind of like Mississauga and some of the other rinks, and like Prince George, stuff like that. It's nothing amazing, but it's certainly not a bad rink. And again, it's one of those kind of just right in the middle.
Yeah, I would agree. In my write-up on my website, I called it like the neutral planet from Futurama of CHL buildings. Like,
what are your thoughts on this momentous occasion? Your neutralness?
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
I didn't have anything particularly good or particularly bad to say about it. It was all just kind of very mid.
So, this is why we didn't talk about everything from last season. This is why we stuck to CHL, because we've gone on this long already about 11 buildings and a couple other side ventures here about the CHL. So, we're going to do a different podcast on a different day talking about where we went for pro rinks last year in 23-24. But before we get out of here, we have to talk about what we have planned for the upcoming 24-25 season. And I guess that's a big reason why you've been so excited for hockey to come back, Kevin. I'm excited for it to come back as well. We have some pretty major plans this season.
So basically, we have some pretty big plans, and I have some pretty big plans for the next couple of months. Like a month from now, just under a month from now, I will be at a Vienna Capitals game in Austria, which is awesome. That is, assuming Air Canada strike doesn't prevent me from going.
Jealous as fuck, by the way.
Yeah, and I don't have tickets for it yet, but I also have plans to see HC Olomouc in the Czech League at some point while we're there. I kind of looked at the teams that were home in the areas that my wife and I were going to be in, and picked one based upon the coolest looking rink. So if for some reason I can't get them, Vitkovica is also home in Ostrava, so it may be that, but I'm hoping for Olomouc, and yeah, it looks fantastic, like an old 1960s communist era. It's called, in Czech, it translates as the like Olomouc Ice Stadium or Ice something, and it looks like a kind of like Old Erie was, like just 4 boxes surrounding the rink, just completely bare bones, but atmosphere looks spectacular. So I'm super excited for that. And then get home from Europe, and like a week and a half later, I'm getting on an airplane and meeting you to, at least for me, finish all 60.
Yeah, we're both gonna. Well, you're finishing all 60 on this trip, and I'm gonna get myself damn close. I guess we've alluded to it on Twitter here and there, but we could say it fully now. The trip actually starts with an NHL game. We're going to see the Seattle Kraken play, which I'm actually pretty excited about.
So am I.
Yeah, this Climate Pledge Arena, lol. But then we follow that up with 4 straight WHL games in Wenatchee, Spokane, Portland, and Tri-City. So Tri-City gets to be your all 60.
Yeah, we were eagerly awaiting the drop of the WHL schedule this year to see just what it is that was going to be an option, and I started looking at the 4 teams, and I got only as far as the end of October. I think it's October 25, 26, 27, and 28, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a 4-4. You never get a 4-4 in the WHL. Why Tri-City's playing a random Monday night home game, I have absolutely no idea, but I'm eternally grateful that they are. Yeah, Thursday night in Seattle, and then Friday in Wenatchee, Saturday in Spokane, Sunday afternoon in Portland. And then I will be completing all 60 on Monday, October the 28th at the Tri-City Coliseum.
I will say I have actually seen a game in Portland, but not at the Coliseum. I got to a game there in 2017, and I saw a game at the Moda Center.
You'll always have that one on me.
Yeah, I will. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they go back to it someday, but
I would be surprised if I went, though.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. As far as you said earlier on the show, Saskatoon was your best kind of junior team in an NHL-ish sized building experience. I think mine would be Portland because, man, that was a fun day at the Moda Center with an absolutely packed lower bowl, no upper bowl seating for that game, but it was still a great experience. But I'm really excited to see the old Coliseum.
It's been a bucket list rink for me for decades. It's really just the fact that you can fly relatively cheaply across the continent now in a way that you weren't able to 10 or 15 years ago. I'm sure I would have been by now, but the Coliseum's an icon. It's icon of modernism. It's won all kinds of architectural awards, and it just looks like a really cool place. I can't wait to see it.
It's not CHL related, but 2.5-3 weeks later, we're going to New England to see some pro and some amateur hockey.
Yep. Well, this would be the weekend of November the 15th, and we're going to do a Friday night in Springfield and a Sunday afternoon in Providence, and separated by, unfortunately, in its last season, the oldest hockey rink in the world, Matthews Arena, home of Northeastern University's NCAA hockey teams, men's and women's. We are going to be going to see the men's team on the Saturday. So, I've been inside Matthews Arena. I walked through it in summer of 2010. But haven't seen a game there, so got to go now if you want to see it.
We're going purely for the rink. We don't care about NCAA hockey in the slightest.
Couldn't care less.
But hey, you know what? If it ends up being a decent game and has a good atmosphere, it will make us want to go to more NCAA games. So
I'm kind of hoping it doesn't.
You don't need more on that list to do list.
I'm already contemplating going to frickin' Iowa for an AHL and ECHL doubleheader. I don't need to add going to like North Dakota to the university up there
right.
with that.
Well, and if the timing for that game works out, you're not going to be doing this, but we think that they don't have they haven't released the time for that men's hockey game at Matthews Arena, but we assume if it is a 7 p.m. start, then I am going to sneak in the afternoon at 1 p.m. to do a Boston Bruins game, which you've already done, so you're not going to do that.
I'm not a Bruins fan myself, and as you'd expect from an original 6 team in a hockey mad city, the tickets are pretty expensive, so I'm probably going to sit it out and just hang around Boston. But, more power to you. I'm glad you're going to get to see it. It was a cool experience. It's just, I found it sort of middle of the road.
Yeah, fair enough. I have tentative plans. This one's a little bit more up in the air, but, as I mentioned, that U.S. trip in October gets me to 59 CHL rinks. So you'll get to 60 before me. My 59 that I'll be, or my 60 that I'll be missing is Victoria, the Victoria Royals. So I've got plans to go out there. Hopefully at the first weekend of December, there's a weekend where the Royals, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Abbotsford Canucks are all at home. They all play 2 home games in a single, weekend, 3-day stretch. So I'm hoping to get out for that weekend. The plans aren't, officially made in concrete. If for some reason they fall through, I definitely have plans to go in the second half. But we have some big second half plans too. And usually I'm the one coming up with the crazy ideas, but Kevin, for our trip in January, which again, we haven't officially confirmed, but I think we're both in for it, assuming work schedules work out for us. But we've got, what is it, a 5 and 4? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we found an itinerary where so I have been to an AHL game in Utica. You haven't, but it's awesome. It filmed Slapshot there, some of the scenes and stuff like that, so it'll be worth going back to. So it'll be Utica Friday night in the AHL, the Comets, and then Saturday a doubleheader. The New Jersey Devils are home at 12:30, and then Lehigh Valley on the Saturday at 7, I think it is, and then Sunday Hershey, and then because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the U.S. and it's a holiday, the Reading Royals are home on the Monday at 1. Which allows us to get home afterwards. If you leave Reading at like 3:30, 3:45 or whatever, you can easily get back to where we live in Hamilton and Toronto and London by bedtime and go to work the next day.
Because, when you can do a Reading ECHL game on a national holiday, you do it, right?
Of course you do.
And then last big one we have planned, at least tentative plans for right now, Southern California. We are expanding like crazy here.
End of March, yeah. My friend Chris and I generally do one NHL trip a year when we can. We didn't do one together last year for the first time in quite a long time because his wife gave birth to a girl and they
Mazel
didn't have
tov.
it in them to do it. Yeah, but we're on the cards next year to hopefully knock off, which is actually the only 2 NHL rinks left that both of us are missing, which is the Kings and the Ducks. After this, assuming that the Kraken happen and that the Kings and Ducks happen, I'll only be missing 3 to complete the NHL, which is all in the Pacific time zone, Vegas, Utah, and San Jose. So that'll be fun. And then we're also going to tack on, as mentioned, I love NHL-sized old rinks, and San Diego still got one, so maybe do a Gulls AHL game while we're down there too.
Another wrinkle to the 24-25 season, Kevin, is the fact that Brampton is unexpectedly back in the OHL, something I'm sure you and I never would have thought we would see again. And of course, I have all that history with my years of supporting the Brampton Battalion growing up in Brampton. But God help us, we're both going to try and get to a game in Brampton this year.
Yeah, and even more depressingly, we're not going to get to see our teams play there because I'm going to be in Europe when the Knights there are playing. And the Storm game is the school day game, which means that I don't know if you'd be allowed to go to a game with a bunch of children that starts at 11 a.m., but you probably wouldn't want to anyway. So
no.
Very depressingly, I'm going to have to go see a neutral Brampton Steelheads game this year. I have given this way more thought than it probably is worth thinking about, but I think that I'm not going to consider my all 60 rink as Brampton because I've been to a game there before. I've actually been to many games, and I know you had season tickets there for years. So I don't think that it's necessary to say, well, there's a new rink this year, so you have to go to that to get to all 60. But that said, I do like to be able to say I've seen every team play at home in their current homes, and because it's only like an hour and 40 minutes from where I live, I will for sure be going to some random Brampton Battalion or Brampton Steelheads game, I should say, this upcoming season. And that's, as depressing as that thought is, at least I don't have to fly in from St. John, New Brunswick to do it.
I was going to say, it's not a new rink. We've both seen OHL games in that building, so it's nothing new in that sense. It's just basically, the different teams' logos at center ice now. So, yeah, it's worth going to see another time, like you said, for you, because it's close. And, of course, I've kind of got all that personal history there. It's going to be really weird for me going to a game there and seeing the Steelheads as the home team.
It'll be a different experience, though, because, again, it was different going to see the Steelheads than it was seeing the Ice Dogs, because they're owned by different people and they run their promotions differently. They run the game differently, right? Like, it'll be a different experience. And, it's the same with if Hamilton gets a team back at the renovated Copps Coliseum, I'll have to go to a game there, and I will go to a game there. Yeah, I'm not really thinking that it's necessary, because I've seen multiple CHL games or OHL games in Brampton already. I don't think it's necessary to go, but I still would like to, and I will make a point of doing that at some point this year.
If we can't see, our teams, the Storm and the Knights, I think the next best option, and it would almost make for a good meme, maybe go to see a North Bay Battalion game there, because that would be weird as hell.
Yeah, I'm certainly not taking time off work for that. But
if they play on a weekend,
if it's a weekend and it's nice weather, then yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah,
well, as fun as it could be anyway.
Yep, for sure. I think I'm already exhausted just talking about the plans, but I'm also super excited for all of that, and hopefully it all plans out. And hey, I still got some other close things I need to do, like Toledo and Fort Wayne, so maybe
both awesome.
Yeah, might be able to squeeze those in this season as well at some point.
I'm sure there'll be a podcast if we do, but if anyone's listening to this, if you're living not too far away, go see a game in Toledo. It's absolutely awesome. It's the best clone rink I've done by far. Great atmosphere. And then Fort Wayne's old rink is basically like the Kitchener Auditorium. It's nicely brought up to date and renovated historical building. It's got all the charm and soul of an old building and all the facilities of a new one. They're both absolutely terrific experiences.
Yeah, can't wait for everything we got planned in 24-25. Before we get out of here, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Kevin, about the Memorial Cup in Saginaw this year. Hey, congratulations, 5th OHL championship. I saw the London Knights, repainted their bus. Yeah, well, we'll get back at you.
One more than Kitchener, one more than Windsor,
Yeah, well. Hey, but what about that Memorial Cup? Because we have to say congrats, first of all, to Saginaw Spirit. I'm sure, I know you had told me if you guys couldn't win that game, you were happy with Saginaw getting it.
Yeah. I mean, when you've won more than one Memorial Cup, if one doesn't go your way, it's kind of water under the bridge. And I've mentioned this before, but I'm a terrible sports fan as well. Like, yes, I'm a London Knights fan, but I'm the least competitive person in the entire world. I don't really care about winning and losing. It's all about the experience for me. I wanted us to win, and because we didn't, I was a little bit sad, but for a day or two. But oh well. I mean, we won 2 in my lifetime, which is 2 more than I ever expected growing up watching a 3-win team. So I'll take it.
There you go. One last thing before we get out of here, actually. I lied about the one before. We have a listener mailbag set up. If you want to give feedback about the show, you want to ask questions to me or any of the other co-hosts on this show, send your emails to all60chlpod@gmail.com, and we'll be doing segments in future pods with your questions and comments. Just make sure you leave your name and where you're writing from, because we want to hear from people all across the CHL. I know I have a bit of an OHL following already with the old podcast, but we want to bring in people from the Q, bring in people from the Dub. So, hey, send in emails, comments, whatever you got. Send it to all60chlpod@gmail.com. Kevin, this has been awesome, and hey, thanks for being the guinea pig and being the co-host for episode 1.
Well, thanks for the chance to reminisce. I kind of missed doing this. We obviously did Fanboys episodes about some of our other trips before, and although we didn't actually come out and say it, I think the plan is we're going to do a podcast every time we travel for the upcoming season. So you've got that to look forward to if you want to hear us rambling with it fresh in our heads about going to places that we've been this season. And you've also got the future episode coming up where we discuss the fact that we saw games in Rockford, Illinois and Wheeling, West Virginia this past year as well.
Yep. If you guys want to hear us talk about Wheeling, West Virginia, stay tuned, because a pod about that is coming, because who doesn't want one about that? And yeah, check out every time we do a trip this year, we're going to have Kevin back as our travel correspondent. We'll hopefully talk about at length about him finishing the All 60 and myself hopefully later this season. But for now, we're going to throw it to next week. Hey, we've got season previews to talk about as we're getting really close to all regular seasons starting. First up, we're going to bring in Patrick McNeil, of course, the voice of the Cape Breton Eagles, as next week he and I tee up the 24-25 QMJHL season. Who's going to be good? Who's going to be bad? Who knows? We'll see. So for Kevin Jordan, I am Steve McLean. Thank you all so much for coming back and listening to this new pod, and let's have some fun in 24-25.
You've been listening to All 60, a CHL podcast. Follow us on social media at All 60 CHL Pod.